Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also, below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using stock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Sleeping Warrior, 10th Man, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. Oh, we've also got John, Refracted Curvature, my bad. Hello, one and all, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yo, yo.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, hello, good to have you all. Going to rattle our way through housekeeping as Anthony's got a bit of a presentation regarding a debate that happened between Raichi 50 or Raichi 00000 and Fight the Flat Earth. So he's going to get into his discussion in terms of gravity after we do a bit of housekeeping. So we'll leave that question till last for obvious reasons. Hey Neil, welcome back.
I'm back.
Good to have you.
Hey, that sounds better.
It does sound better.
I'm back.
Excellent. Good to have you. I didn't know you'd gone. Right, let's do a bit of housekeeping. Right, any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as Earth curvature?
Nope. But if you calculate it using R, you can think of it as a physical geometric edge.
Think of what? What's it?
The physical curvature at the horizon. You can think of it as a curve.
How are you calculating it without measuring it? Anything.
We'll just calculate the curve into existence, and then you can think of it as a curve.
You need a radius.
He's back to saying it again.
Yeah, we'll assume it.
Imagination wins.
It being the horizon.
Yeah.
Okay. The horizon's not Earth curve.
Well, the minute.
No, but you can think of it as Earth curve. If we assume R, then calculate it. Maths is reality according to Red's rhetoric, right? So if we calculate it because we assume it, then it becomes a reality, does it not?
No, black swan.
No, the minute it exceeds the geometric limitations, you can't assume it anymore.
All right, yeah, but then we just add in our band-aid called refraction, and then that fixes everything, and we can just infinitely vary it as much as necessary, always so that it appears to be flat again, I might add. Never that it goes beyond that or still slightly curved, always flat. But we can adjust for it.
But then you lose the measurement that you're basing it off of.
Precisely.
What measurement? We're basing it on this. This is on maths.
No. Your maths is basing the R value on geometry. Just flat out, straight mathematics, if you like, geometric in nature. The moment you say it's refracted, then the reality that you're basing that refraction on, that would be a curved surface with terrestrial refraction at 7/6 or whatever variant of the R value, requires you to have measured R in the first instance. That's John's point. Well, if you say refraction, well, you're destroying the very measurement of the geometry because you can no longer measure it.
Nah, just assume it, calculate it, and then it becomes a reality if we say it enough.
My favourite in the chat is when this conversation comes up, normally following a conversation about the sextant. Where'd you get a straight line for a sextant? Well, we just look and we see and we get one. Black swan. Globe debunked. That's the shorthand version. The longhand version is, how'd you get a straight line for the sextant? Well, how does the sextant work? It looks at the horizon and that gives you a straight flat baseline. Earth is flat. That's the only way that would work. You ask a glober where they get a straight line from, and they say, well, we could just get a straight line of sight. That would be a straight line to, in this instance, the horizon. Now, the black swan would have the horizon at a fixed location. If you've got a straight line to it, it becomes geometric. That's what you're doing with your triangles for triangulation. You're using pure geometry. Well, their pure geometry relies on an R value that has a capability of being measured. Now, when they say straight line to the horizon for a sextant, oh, right, well, we've just had 21 months of you telling us it's refracted. Never a straight line to acquire. Always refracted. That's your explanation for the black swan. So it leaves them in the most cognitive pain to date I have seen in chat sessions. So as the Uncut and After show goes up, I'll often be sat in the chat monitoring it. I won't necessarily always chat, but I am always there monitoring it for the most part. And I see this conversation. They say that they can get a straight line for the sextant, and then when you point out that their lines are bent, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to get around the fact that they've now recognised their own paradox. One of their rebuttals is straight line to the horizon for the plane geometry in triangular form that is needed when plane sailing. So they just say, well, we just get a straight line. We just use the tool as intended. Straight line to the horizon, right? That's how it's intended to work for triangles with flat bottoms. Oh yeah, you've just told us it's refracted, black swan. Well, we just get a straight line. You've just told me it's refracted, black swan. Well, it's a refracted line, so sextant doesn't work on a globe then. And so you go round and round in circles with their cognitive pain very much on show. It's embarrassing.
Well,
Yeah.
Virus is saying in chat that you're lying, and it works the same way. We get a straight line like you all do, he's saying there. And then he says the almanac gives you corrections. I love this sextant argument, Virus says.
Corrections for what? If he's getting a straight line, what does he need to correct for?
It's the funniest thing in the world. There's so much cognitive there. Yeah, there's so much cognitive dissonance in what he typed out. It's crazy.
Right.
Well, see, the thing is, both sides admit, both sides will admit that it's locally flat, right? Everybody agrees that it appears flat on both sides, whether they want to say it now or not. That's within their rhetoric with the tangent plane. So we measure it flat locally. Well, you need to measure curvature to counteract that measurement. And the minute you say refracted, you've thrown it away. So all you measure is flat.
Yeah, you've highlighted this a couple of times, John. Well, their locally flat argument, if they employed that, number one, they'd have to employ it before the black swan had come into existence, and you can't go back in time. So that doesn't hold water anymore because you just say black swan. If they say, oh, well, I take a locally flat geometric horizon that was formerly Earth curve and assume that that's actually a flat line going out, not dropping 8 inches per mile squared, because tangent planes, that was your excuse. We won't get into what a tangent plane is, but yeah, we'll just say for the sake of argument, we swallow that. And go, okay, so you as a globe earther accept local flatness. Well, beyond your acquisition of a straight flat line by utilisation of the horizon for the base of a triangle, when you drop a plumb from the star to its ground position, your straight flat line that you accepted as locally flat to acquire this will extend beyond the horizon and remain flat to the GP of the star. So locally flat doesn't wash either.
Well, it's interesting that they always have to draw a tangent plane, even though, how can I put this? Why are they always drawing that tangent plane? Why do they have to go to that extent? if it's curved, it's curved, and it'd be easily, readily there for everyone to know. But because it's not curved, they always draw a straight, short tangent plane on all of their orthographic, pictures, and when they try to explain it. Why are they drawing that tangent plane? What makes them do that?
Because it's flat, and
It's
they have
in order
deal
to
with
find the
flatness.
radius.
Yeah, they need flatness. So tangent, well, that's just them acquiring a straight line to what they assume is drop that they're not going to deal with when they actually measure the plane of that tangent plane, which is essentially a flat area. So they do it because Earth is actually flat, and they've got to deal with that fact when they actually deal with reality. Their assumptions have to be embedded in the presupposition that there's a curve going on when they deal with the flat surface. So if anybody takes a cursory glance, they say, oh no, tangent plane means tangent to a sphere. They don't highlight the fact that they're actually utilising a flat plane when they deal with a tangent plane. The clue's in the title, of course. Plane, tangent, plane. Well, what's the tangent bit? Presupposition of a sphere. What's the plane bit? The bit we're actually dealing with, the flat surface of the ground that we actually have beneath our feet. The plane bit. The plane. Yeah, that's the plane bit. The assumption being that we're actually tangent to a sphere when we deal with the flat surface. Shout out to Antecedent Algonquin Collective. What a name. Thank you for joining as a member.
Yeah, but that's my whole point. So they have to go to an extra effort to make it flat, but that's how they started. But they're trying to put the con job on everybody by saying we're living on a curved surface. Well, why don't you just leave it curved then and let all your instruments work on the actual physical surface you say it is? Oh, no, it doesn't work that way because it's really, really flat. So we need that tangent plane. And yesterday, citing the astronomer, he said that the GP of the sun or star, 3, 4, 5,000 miles, whatever distance away, all the way to the observer is a right angle. So how in the world do you have a 5,000 mile tangent plane giving you a right angle on a curved surface?
You can't. Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
You're going to need R for that.
Any evidence of the R value?
Black Swan.
Debunked.
Say again, Jorge.
Black Swan.
Indeed. Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container?
Impossible.
No.
A couple of people who are on
Even
mute
if you
are
had
off mute
R?
now, in case you were unaware. Where were we? Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
No, because they're all observation based only, and none of them have got a valid hypothesis. None of them have got a valid independent variable. They just look at stuff. It's a bit like the Cavendish experiment.
Well, if you're describing your phenomenon with an R value involved, then you'll never be able to enter the scientific method.
And also Black Swan.
But we have to be generous and give them that they can have a phenomenon, aren't they? They can actually have one. What they do with it, and whether they can do anything scientific with it, is a different matter. But
They can have a what, Meekin?
I know I hate the word phenomena. You listen to me any time I try and say that word, Tony. I shit it. It just never comes out right, and it's worse at night.
Hey, I've got to correct you.
After a couple of minds.
Paula's in the audience. Sorry, Sleeping Warrior, stepping all over you. Paula's in the audience. So, a phenomenon, did you say?
Phenomenonymous, yeah. Lots of them.
No.
No. Yeah, phenomena.
Perfect. Yeah, they've got plenty of phenomena. Well, so what? They got half a hypothesis then.
Yeah, that's all they're going to get, isn't it? Half.
Half.
Well, their description becomes invalid at that point. So I don't even know if I would give them that they have a phenomenon to study.
Oh no, because what you describe's true. If you want to then put that description in to a heliocentric paradigm, then yeah, it turns tits up. But if I see the sun transiting across the sky, that is exactly what I see.
But they say the sun goes behind the horizon.
Well, no, they say the sun stays where it is and it's me that's spinning. So it becomes nonsensical and a non-description when they try to put it into that paradigm. But as it sits, if you actually describe what you see, that's legit.
So you see the sun go behind the horizon or into the horizon?
Oh, that's the point where you're putting it into a description of a model, isn't it? For either of us.
Yeah, that's his point.
Yeah. So you can have the phenomenon as long as you don't try and describe it in their model, yeah? Are we agreeing to agree here?
Seems like it.
Having not disagreed.
You can have a phenomena, but also some phenomena aren't in the model. They're just in the maths. So, for example, the notion, the phenomenon claimed as mass attracting mass. Nothing
Yeah,
to
but
observe.
in this case, it's assuming the outcome, isn't it? Because what they have is Q, therefore P.
Yeah, it's a begging the question fallacy. We'll get to that in a second, though. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
You're going to need art for that.
Yeah, that's true. Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Oh, definitely not. It's like everything else, Nathan. It only appears in the maths.
I'll
I'm sure you're going to need
re-emphasise-
art for that as well.
yeah, 50% of the time. You will need that.
Actually, no, I don't agree with that. I think that you could have gravity on a flat Earth too.
What is gravity?
Center of mass.
See, gravity. What is gravity? See, we don't know what it is, but we know what it does.
Hold on. There's only two different types of gravity, and neither are applicable flat Earth or otherwise. One is mass attracting mass. The other is a conceptual medium being bent by the uneven distribution of mass. Well, neither are applicable. What do you mean you can have that on a flat Earth? Mathematically, if the Earth was flat, you could reify the same nonsense into existence with maths. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, I mean, this perception that a lot of people seem to have that things fall down when they ignore other things that go up, because like that third law of motion that Newton states is for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. They ignore that and they think that something falling down means it's being attracted to the ground. You could still have that on a flat plane. It's just not to the center of mass. It's just to the ground.
Okay, before you
Then
launch
that's
into
not
your,
gravity.
yeah, indeed. Before you launch into discussion about Raichi 00000 and Fight the Flat Earth and their discussions in regards to gravity, I'm just going to give a couple of qualifiers and then hopefully you'll launch in off the back of that. So, number one, we've already covered, which is to say there isn't any scientific evidence of gravity. So there's no phenomena and there's no reification of the mathematical description that only exists in pseudo-4 space. So neither of these two things are applicable. I just want to get that out of the way immediately. Further to that, the laws of motion of Newton were not right. And when Anthony's detailing them in the next 15 to 20 minutes, I want you to appreciate that he's working within their paradigm. So he's criticising what they think the claim is versus what the claim actually is, notwithstanding that gravity, A, isn't a force, B, hasn't got a phenomenon of mass attracting mass, and C, we don't live in pseudo-4 space. So all those things are notwithstanding. So when Anthony discusses it, it doesn't mean he's conceding that those things are true. He's just laying out the paradigm. So I don't want to hear any crap from people in the comment section telling me, so Anthony accepts that blah, 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 insert his version of what is being claimed versus the version that's being argued. I don't want to hear it. That's my qualifier. Hopefully everyone else will pop themselves on mute while Anthony launches into his discussion about the show he watched. I didn't yesterday at about midnight UK time. Is everybody on mute? You ready to take it away, Anthony?
Yeah, I'll just quickly screen share.
Oh, the screen sharing. Oh, God. So I can't just go and get a brew. Okay.
No, you can, because I'll control it. It's fine.
I was joking. Okay, you're
Are
on.
we up?
Yeah. Ready when you are.
All right. So last night, midnight, I didn't watch it live. I watched it first thing this morning because sleep's paramount these days. But anyway, Raichi 50 was arguing with Fight the Flat Earth, and obviously he gets onto gravity. Now, she asks a very basic high school level question on F equals MA. And I was gobsmacked at the obfuscation tactics that were in play. It's a very, very simple question that she asks. And what she's pointed out is that she's pointing out that these people, these anti-flat earthers, will obfuscate at all costs when they're cornered. And she's trying to point out to them that they substitute Newton's second law in lieu of Newton's first law. So she asks them, where do you get the A from in F equals ma? Now, what they're doing is they're calculating the force into existence because they see something accelerate. They calculate the force from it, applying the sum. And then because there's an acceleration of a mass and then they calculate the force, they claim that it doesn't matter where the force comes from so long as they see something accelerating. But the problem is they were talking about gravity. So because gravity is not a force, it doesn't accelerate and cannot accelerate mass. That's the current position in physics today, science today. But they want to apply Newtonian gravitation at all times because they want to insist that mass attracts mass, and Newton's universal gravitational theory insists that mass attracts mass. They want to apply that always, and it's not the current position in science anymore. So Newton's first law of motion states that an object in motion or an object at rest will remain in motion or at rest unless acted upon by a force. Fight the Flat Earth took massive issue with the fact that she didn't say an unbalanced force because he thinks that that's important. It isn't important, and what I'm about to show is not only is he wrong, but even if he was right, it doesn't change the position. They still need to answer the question. So what I'm going to do now, flick over to the next page. I've not used PowerPoint for a long time. So this is a screenshot where after asking the question, F equals ma, where do you get the A from? He's working out, he's trying to use a load of mathematics to get to the A, the answer, and this is what he gives us the answer. And then he insists that this is satisfying the requirements for acceleration. And she's trying to get him to go back to the application of Newton's first law, which we're going to look at now. So in this, let's go back to this. Oh, I've not put it on. In this, let me just make sure where that is, because that should be in there. This is kind of important. Just bear with me. Yeah, it's there. Oh. There. Sorry, F5. So this is taken from this particular book. It's in obviously Newton's laws of motion was written in Latin, and none of us speak Latin. And you've got to allow for a little bit of wiggle room because there might be some element of being lost in translation. But nonetheless, this is a translation using Latin, using this particular guy, Andrew Mott. You can. There's the ISBN number. You can search it. You can buy it on whatever, Amazon or whatever. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at Newton's first and second laws of motion. And throughout what I'm going to say now, you've got to remember that the point I'm making is that they substitute the calculation of F equals ma in lieu of Newton's first law of motion. That's what they're doing. They're substituting mathematics in lieu of his first law of motion, okay? So he said, Fight the Flat Earth said, he focused massively on the unbalanced force bit, and he insists that Newton said it. But this is actually from Newton's book, Newton's law of Newton's Principia, however you want to pronounce it. Every body preserves in its state of rest or of uniform motion in a right line unless it is compelled to change that state by forces impressed thereon. Now, it doesn't say unbalanced forces, and this is the final edition, right? So this is the most recent version of, he did a couple of revisions of it, but this is the most recent version of. It doesn't say unbalanced forces. So Fight the Flat Earth, when he dwells on the unbalanced forces claim from Newton, that is actually wrong. That doesn't come into it. That was substituted later. Newton didn't say it. So Fight the Flat Earth is incorrect to dwell on the unbalanced forces bit. It was substituted later on. But basically what this says in normal everyday language is an object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by a force. Okay, that's the first rule. So to get an object to accelerate, you have to give a force. You have to apply a force, an interaction, a push or a pull, a repulsion, a propulsion. Whatever word you want to do, there's got to be a doing word. It's got to have a verb to describe the interaction between the object that's not moving and the thing that's making it move. There's got to be something there, otherwise it won't accelerate. Okay, that's the first one. Now, what that also means is if you haven't got a force, it isn't going to accelerate. So an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by a force, right? So it's not going to accelerate without a force, right? And in the second law of motion, which is what they always apply, F equals ma, it doesn't actually say F equals ma anywhere in Newton's second law. It says the alteration of motion is ever proportional to the motive force impressed, and it is made in the direction of the right line in which that force is impressed. And then it goes on to make some more. But the point is, it doesn't say F equals ma. That's simply a calculation. Now, these laws of motion essentially were superseded, or they were refined by quantum mechanics, which I'm not going to go into, but I want people to be aware that they were not right and they needed to be changed by quantum mechanics in 1925. Einstein's theory of general relativity was 1915. Let's flip back to that first one for a second, because I just want to point this bit out. Projectiles persever, basically continue in their motions so far as they are not retarded by the resistance of the air or impelled downwards by the force of gravity. Key word that, downwards by the force of gravity. Well, we all know that gravity is not a force because Einstein changed it in 1915 when he redefined gravity. He invented a whole new geometry. He limited the speed of light to a constant and basically radicalized gravitation from the force that Newton's describing here into an effect. This is an important note, and this is a really important distinction to observe, because if gravity is not a force, there can be no effect, because you need a force to cause the acceleration of mass. This is what Rachel was asking. Where do you get that acceleration from in F equals ma? Well, there is no acceleration of mass if you haven't got a force to do it. You need a force to accelerate mass. But what they're doing is substituting a force, and they're calculating the force as though the force exists. Well, the calculating isn't going to give you an accelerating mass. You need a force to do that, not a calculation, not a load of gibberish. Doesn't matter how eloquent your equations are, be them Einstein's field equations or fight the flat earth scribbling on a whiteboard. Doesn't matter how good your maths are, that doesn't accelerate mass. You need a force, not a calculation, force. So what these people are doing, and Rachel had them totally cornered, right? She had blue marble science on, and he was explaining to her how he did the Cavendish repeat, and how he was, and she basically said to him, "What's making the balls accelerate?" And he's saying, "Well, it's obviously something that looks and acts like a force." And she said, "Well, what force is it?" And he can't answer that question. So these people will do everything to stop them from answering that question because their answer is gravity. But as we know, gravity is not a force. It was replaced by Einstein in 1915 as an effect. Now, let's just push Einstein a couple of steps further. Einstein was verified according to science in 1919 with the observation of Eddington, where he observed the stars behind the sun. And in doing so, he validated, according to science, he validated that Einstein was in fact correct, because the observation of the stars behind the sun would not be possible unless space-time was bending, okay? So at 1919, that was verified to be Einsteinian, to be correct. That's the claim. Fast forward 100 or so years, and you've got LIGO. So mid-1990s, they started to build and got towards completing the LIGO observational thing, the gravitational wave observatory. And that was at a cost of $1.1 billion. That's not just a number. That is a massive number, a huge number, right? $1.1 billion. It took them 10 years and numerous false claims, false starts for the observation of gravitational waves. If LIGO detects gravitational waves and it's supporting Einstein because it's gravitational waves, Newton didn't have gravitational waves. He did have changes in direction of gravity when accelerations occur, but he didn't have gravitational waves, and that's what LIGO is specifically detecting. It proves that Einstein is correct and not Newton. So it goes beyond the Eddington observation, and it is claimed that by having gravitational waves, Einstein is correct and Newton is not. And that is the current position in science today. Not that I agree with it, I don't, but that's what the current position is in science today. Why that's important is because Newton is now historical. He's not current anymore. You can't use his maths to calculate forces into existence. You can't do it because you haven't got the force in the first place applying Newton's first law to be able to do so. You have to have a force to accelerate mass. You can't have calculations to accelerate mass. And this is the point that Rachel was trying to get to. And he will not let her speak. She's absolutely right. The more she asks the question, the more irate he gets, and he starts calling her a stupid bint and all the usual insults, rather than address the actual question. Her point is valid. How do you get the acceleration if you've just got a mass? And the answer is, in the first law, it states that you've got to have a force. I've said it about 10 times, and I'm emphasizing it so that you get the message. What it doesn't say is that you can calculate a force into existence using the second law. It says you need a force. Yeah. So when these idiots are calculating a force using F equals ma, they are substituting the requirement of a force under Newton's first law for a calculation of F equals ma under his second law. And that violates Newton's first law because it doesn't say you can have a calculation to get a force. You need a force to get a force. You need a force to get an acceleration. What they do to get around this is they deliberately conflate force and acceleration. If there's an acceleration, there's got to be a force. We agree. You haven't got a force, so they calculate that force into existence, and then they think that they've got a force. Meanwhile, in the real world, nothing's moving. You need a force to make something to move, not a calculation. I've said it 10 times. But this is the bit that our side are now beginning to get, and they're realizing that these guys conflate force with effect, because they will literally say, if you've got an acceleration, you've then got a force. But they don't say, yeah, we need a force to get the acceleration. That's the point that Rachel was trying to get to, and they would not let her get to it. So no matter what she did, he would not answer the question unless he was referring to mathematics. And that isn't the answer. So I'm going to finish with, this is where F equals ma comes from in the second law. It actually comes from his definition, right? His definition states that the quantity of motion is the measure of the same arising from the velocity and the quantity of matter conjunctly. That's what he's describing there. That's where the F equals ma comes from. So it doesn't even come from the second law of motion. It comes from an interpretation of the definition. So 2 points there. Newton did not say that there was an unbalanced force in the first law of motion. And F equals ma doesn't even come from the second. It comes from an interpretation of the definition. Okay? And then we're going to end with this, because this is essentially what they're doing. If you read along with me, I'll transpose my point over the top of these words here. Oh, well, never mind that. Now I have a acceleration to gravitation. That's the scientific formula. Accelerating mass through the calculation of sums, and now I have an acceleration of mass. So in the same way that this prisoner is trying to escape jail by calculating how he can walk through walls, and obviously you can't calculate how you can walk through walls, he thinks you can. They are doing exactly the same thing, but rather than escaping jail with a calculation, they're making mass accelerate with a calculation. But it violates Newton's first law of motion, which requires a force, not a calculation. If our side can get that right and apply this against them regularly, they'll stop claiming that F equals ma, therefore we've got gravitational attraction, because that is literally what they're doing. I'm done. Anybody got any questions?
Very good. Thank you first and foremost before anybody launches in. Good presentation.
Was that a picture of that guy, fight the flat earth?
Who cares? Any comments on the presentation
The ugly
in terms
bastard.
of F
I've got a
equals
few.
ma? Anybody at all?
Yep.
Go ahead, Adam.
I remember doing this in A-level physics. How do you get it? And getting it is, again, a trick. I'll put simply, you take real-term stuff and you take a ball bearing and you drop it. And this is where they get the numbers for the A. If I could just screen share for a second.
Now, just before you do, Adam, do numbers satisfy Newton's first definition, Newton's first law of motion?
No, No, and it gets better as well. So just, it is exactly numbers. If you can see here, what they're going to do is take these things and then use the formula equation for a line of y equals mx plus c to define that the gradient will be equal to the force of gravity. And the way they do that is by taking stuff and dropping it. Now, I would suggest to you that what you're measuring there is the force that you've had to put in to the system, and then you're measuring it equilibrate. There is no overreaching force. You're just measuring the displacement you put into the system by picking up the ball bearing, dropping it. That's what you're demonstrating there. You're not demonstrating a force that you can't demonstrate. But what I want to do, just to give Nathan a giggle, is go to the top. This is A-level physics that is from, and I shall just read it. The overall aim of the experiment is to calculate the value of the acceleration due to gravity g. This is done by measuring the time it takes for a ball bearing to fall a certain distance. The acceleration is then calculated as I briefly outlined. Variables. Independent variable is height, and the dependent variable is time. Your controls are the steel boring, the same electromagnet, and the distances. And I'll leave it at that, because I think no more.
Well, sorry, from what I understand, the proposed hypothesis is if height, then time. Is that correct?
That seems to be what comes out of an A-level physics syllabus, yeah.
If height, then time is the claimed experimental alternative hypothesis. My God, what's the world come to, Adam?
Shocking.
See, and this is the shit that they're teaching kids, right? Yeah. And I heard Conspiracy Cats recently attack Spurs Chemo, and he said, you have no idea what they're teaching kids. And that's a valid point. We're not kids. We're not in school anymore. So what do they teach kids? And if this is an example of what they're teaching kids, that the independent variable can be height, what is height? It's an arbitrary measuring scale that we ascribe to the distance between objects in a vertical axis, right? But it's a concept. It's not a valid independent variable.
Well, I know they're warning kids about flat earthers. That I know for a fact.
Really?
Just to round that out, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, no medium was mentioned.
Absolutely none. No.
Well, that was another spin-off that I wanted to just add. Newton's first law of motion states that an egg will remain in the middle of its medium unless acted upon by a force, right? It doesn't mention the medium. But if you have the interaction of one relative egg relative to its medium, and you vary the medium or the egg or the density of the mass or the volume of either, then an acceleration occurs. And if you isolate the perception or the perspective to just the egg, then you will say, well, there must be a force there. And we can say, well, there is a force. It's pressure. Pressure is caused by the interactions of the molecules against the walls of its container. And we put more molecules in that medium, and we increase the rate of collisions between the egg, the medium and the surface, and that pushed the egg up. And all of the mass went below the egg. Now, we can satisfy that definition, right? But conversely, if you say, if you don't limit it to just the egg and you take into account all the relative circumstances and include the medium, you don't even have to. There's a problem with Newton's first law of motion there, because it says that an object in motion, an object at rest, will remain at rest unless acted upon by a force. Well, we varied the density of the medium, and it caused an acceleration. And as them lot would say, well, where's the force in that? Well, even though we can say it's pressure, and that's a valid scientific explanation, because Newton's first law doesn't reference mediums, you're working outside of that first law of motion, yet you're still achieving the same result. So the question really is Newton's first law of motion wide and broad enough to account for all of the variables when there are other variables that cause acceleration that he doesn't really consider or account for? And it's a bit epistemological, but it's still a valid question to ask.
Anybody from Discord got any comment on what Anthony's presented? Feel free.
Any science deniers who want to challenge the science that was presented?
Wasn't any science presented.
Well, Any non-science deniers want to question any of the non-science that was presented?
Alrighty then.
Well, the little bit I did watch, I noticed the other question that he really shied away from was what causes the rotation of the Earth, right? Because he has to answer the same question. Where's the force?
Struggle to.
What is causing the rotation of the Earth?
What causes it?
It's all density dependent, isn't it? When you combine two liquids and one is lighter than the other, and because they don't mix, there is no vector down. Actually, the liquid is going up.
Hold on a second. I don't like that question.
There is a vector up and down.
Hold on.
We've demonstrated that so one of the things that Fight the Flat Earth claimed was that relative density disequilibrium doesn't account for or explain the directionality, but it does, because this is where, I'm reluctant to even have this conversation with people on their side.
Sorry, why are you explaining this? Do you have a claim in this regard, Anthony?
I just can I can rebut the assertion that relative density doesn't have a directionality to it.
No. You've already done that. Refutation of a claim of gravity has been achieved, right? Further to that, you can, if you choose to, offer up a claim now. But why would you do that?
Just to rebut the nonsense, the lie that Fight the Flat Earth has said.
You're falling into the trap of feeling that it's somehow your responsibility to offer up an alternative explanation. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate over the last 2 years, maybe even longer, starting with you and Arwin just discussing the relative density disequilibrium argument in juxtaposition with the gravity argument. That was fascinating. However, much as I appreciate it, and I'm the first to say we're in a world of discovery and we can find out new things, and this is one of them. In this specific respect, when it's somebody making a claim about gravity, rip it to shreds and just leave it at that. In 20 minutes, if you would like to just bring up relative density and just start describing it, I'd be like, yeah, cool, man, let's discuss this, is great. But in this regard, it leaves the impression that somehow you've got to offer an alternative and you don't. Just want to make that clear. You feel free to if you want to.
Yeah, I want to rebut the assertion that Fight the Flat Earth claims wrongly that relative density doesn't account for or explain the directionality. His question was what?
Sucker, go ahead. Sucked you in good and proper, hasn't he?
Well, you can interpret it as a sucker if you wish, but this gent that's just spoke then basically heard him say that, and if I don't address it, he will believe that Fight the Flat Earth is correct because I refuse to address it. Yeah, but the reality is...
let me just address that. So what you're saying is, unless you buy into his false dichotomy, he'll think he's won his false dichotomy, correct?
But it's just a false point that he's raised that is not true.
Yeah, you've dealt with all that. Look, I'm not going to labour the point. If you want to go into offering up an alternative so that he can then pull apart that and then claim he's won anyway, because your version of events that you'll now offer can be then focused on to be pulled apart, rather than leaving it at the refutation of what's already been claimed. Because then there's nothing to come back at you with, but you feel free.
So the gent that just spoke, would you mind repeating the question for the audience benefit?
Bendy Spacetime, can you repeat your statements about your impressions of the Raichi triple, quad, what is it, 5 zeros, and Fight the Flat Earth debate? Go ahead.
I mentioned that she was trying to get him to explain the cause of the rotation of the Earth when they were talking about centrifugal force, and he avoided answering that at all costs.
It was a different bloke. Somebody else after that comment said something like...
that was George. That was George that spoke out for me.
Oh, me. Now, what I said was it's medium dependent. When you combine two liquids, the top liquid doesn't go down. It actually floats on top of the previous one. That's what I said. There is no vector of down. There is no gravity. It's medium dependent.
There is no vector of down. That's right. Right. Okay. So I misunderstood your point. I thought you were echoing his words when he said that it doesn't account for the directionality of mass. I've mistaken. So I'll leave that for another day because I want to save that until somebody actually brings it up.
Cool. Everyone's a winner.
We'll move on from now.
Yeah, cool. Everyone's a winner then. So I can address Bendy Spacetime's concerns, because that immediately led on to cause of Earth rotation. So what we're into the begging the question of Earth rotation and trying to ascertain the cause of it. I don't really understand how that came up. Maybe you can fill me in.
I didn't hear that bit, to be honest.
They were talking about centrifugal force. And so she asked about, what's causing the Earth rotation. But I guess you're right. It is begging the question.
Beg the question
Right
for
away.
him. Very interesting.
He seemed very uncomfortable with trying to answer that.
I'm surprised at that as well. Why
What?
wouldn't he just rub his hands together? Because she's just begged the question for him, right?
Well, she's accepted the Earth's rotating. That's the point.
Yep.
And they said, give me a just so story now. Move forward with a just so story.
Yeah, why didn't he rub his hands and just give her one?
No, he didn't even have to do that.
Yeah, I
He
don't
could have
know.
just said, I don't know the cause of Earth's rotation, but at least we agree it's rotating.
Exactly. That's what I'd done if I was on his side. I'd have just gone, right, you want me to give you the cause? I don't know, but we all agree it's rotating. Happy days.
Gonna
See,
need that
that's
for
the
that.
problem.
You will
But
need
that's the
that for that.
problem, though,
If you
because-
were there, Jorge, you'd have just pummeled it right there and then, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, of course. To be rotating, you're gonna need R for that.
See, that was like one of the main problems that the whole hangout had, was that anytime he asked her a question and she took a breath to be able to give a rebuttal, she'd get 2 or 3 words out and he'd speak over her and not allow her to speak. Yet when she did the same back to him to try and interrupt him when he was misrepresenting things that she was saying, he'd say things like, back to her, saying things like, stop talking while I'm talking, little girl, in the most unbelievably poor way ever. But it just stops her from talking effectively, and he gets to say what he wants, unchallenged, essentially, because he wouldn't let her speak.
It doesn't stop people listening, Tony, and hearing that, though. It doesn't support their argument when they behave like that, especially if you're going to behave in that, sounds like a misogynistic attitude. People aren't deaf to that, are they?
If you were in that Fight the Flat Earth chat last night as a Ball Earther and you thought that there was anything positive in that from the Ball Earth side, you are deluded. There was nothing positive. He never let her speak. He didn't address her. He didn't answer her main question that she must have said 10 times more. He wouldn't answer it. All he would do is basically conflate, obfuscate, and distract away at all times so that he didn't have to answer it. And that was essentially
the
what he did.
Ball Earth view, Tony, is one thing, and I genuinely don't give a flying cahoots as in stuff like that how the Ball Earthers perceive it. The newbies, the neutrals, yeah, that's what's important in those kind of forums where they have got the viewers, so they are going to get not anti-flat earthers coming in, but just people who are flat curious. Yeah. Now, they're the conversations. I think they destroy themselves when they behave like that, when they talk like that, when they don't answer the point. And if somebody is genuinely interested, they'll hear that. And the ballers do all our work for us by the simple fact that intelligent people can go, you're not answering the question, mate. Yeah. Especially if somebody's being polite and trying to get the point and you're getting over talked, that's a win, it sounds like to me. Not they might come away thinking, yeah, we didn't let her get a word in edgeways, we just kept overriding her and misrepresenting her position. We won that debate. Those days are gone.
Yep, those days are gone.
Well, I can't understand how people, like in debate, really, why are people not stomping the ground demanding they give them R? Like, they need to do that now.
Maybe she
It's-
did. We
how
don't know if
long?
she didn't. Did you watch? I certainly didn't. Did you watch? Talking to you, John.
No, I've just based it off what Anthony said. Never mind.
Yeah, okay. Did she stomp out this or any of the other arguments that were had with a request for R?
To be honest, 90% of the show was about Einstein, Newton, gravity, and F equals ma. So they never really departed from that topic. There was an end to it, but there was only a limited, small amount of time at the end afterwards. So they didn't really get past it. So no.
I did notice, Tony, I don't know if you can put the picture back up with Fight the Flat Earth and his little bit of maths, but he does need R. You look at the picture. He puts R in there. There it is. Look, R squared.
Yep.
Yeah, so you're going to need R for that, Chunky.
It's funny because
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I think what Nathan did when with that one guy about debating cats, demanding that they give R before the debate happens. I think that's where flat earthers need to be at. We need, like, if you're wanting to debate somebody, they need to have R before they can beg the question.
Yeah, I don't think Rachie 50 watches the show enough. She might pass by periodically, but she's definitely not up to date. But these people won't listen to anything that she says. When she gets them cornered, they will apply tactics to get out of it at all costs. So, for example, he brought Hillbilly Blue Balls in to talk about his Cavendish experiment that he repeated, and basically, it is a parlor trick. And he was asking, she'd cited that phrase, "It's a parlor trick," and then they were trying to pin her on exactly why was it a parlor trick. And I was in my head, I was thinking she's going to come up with, like, there's no valid observed phenomena, no hypothesis, no IVDV, and basically they did get her cornered because she didn't give an answer to it when challenged. But if that had been anybody else that spat out, "Where's the IV? Where's the DV? Where's the hypothesis?" they wouldn't have got away with, like, refuting their claim that it was just words that she was spewing or words to that effect, because that is essentially what they managed to show, and that's because she's not up to date with the flat earth debate, Rachie.
Well, I will plug my own show and advise everyone to share, etc. But I do want 10th Man to just read out his comment that he typed himself in the Skype chat. Can you just read out what you just put, 10th?
Yeah, this is Ayn Rand's statement. You can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality.
No,
and it just...
No, I want you to read what you wrote. Read what you wrote.
I'm transitioning. So I wrote, you can avoid R, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding R.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
The greatest fairy tale in the world, and it ends the moment you ask them where they got the radius from.
That's the point in that maths, John, that I was saying. They've gone very clever on Rachie there. They've gone straight to mathematics and done a nice bit of deriving and jiggling and reorganizing the formula. But fundamentally, they've put an R in there, and she can reject it at that point, yeah, unless Nathan demands. Where'd you get your R first? If you're going to use it in something, I think it's perfectly reasonable in 2021, if we're going to use a constant in a formula, that it's validatable, that constant. And it's fundamental if you're going to use that bit of maths, that you have to use R. Therefore, it's perfectly reasonable to define it. And if you can't verify it, then there's no point carrying on with the derivation, because it's just not based in reality. It's just numbers.
Right. These are powerful words that are coming out of Adam's mouth, and I want to stress that, because the turnaround was stated, it's probably 18 months ago now, it was overtly and specifically stated on the show that the tables had turned. Very specifically, everything had flipped on its head in terms of how the debate, the discussion, the argument was going. From feeling like you're fighting a losing battle as a flat earther, the odds being stacked against you, society being stacked against you, and your debate opponents being stacked against you, to the complete antithesis of that. I don't concern myself in the slightest with this discussion anymore. I don't lose any sleep over it. It doesn't faze me. And we're winning. There's no arguments that we've left unturned. There's nothing that we haven't covered. And as a consequence, we don't get that many people coming in to oppose what we state. So that means that 90-10, 90%, 10%, this is a training ground. This show has always been labelled as education. Now, when it was first labelled education, it was my belief that the process would be educational. Now, that's still true, but the show, in not just name only, is very much an education-based show. You're saying, well, Rachel wasn't up to date with the Flat Earth debate. She'd appreciate that. Just asking for where they measured R, well, even if you knew that and asked, you might not necessarily know that having a good grasp of the black swan is the means to having the ability to just ask somebody where they got their R value. You've got to be able to back up these arguments, but you've got to be up to date with the flat Earth debate in order to do that. So for that reason, when I encourage people to share the show, maybe give people a hint of what's going to happen. It's got it in the title, so you don't have to tell them debate. It's labelled Flat Earth Debate, but that's a title. You know, you can tell them, you know, this is a great training ground for understanding how to undo globe arguments, how to prove Earth is flat. If you want to learn how to do that in a better way, here you go. Go and watch this show. And that's all we talk about. That's literally all we talk about. How to debate the nature of reality. One of the biggest paradigm shifting things that will ever happen in most people's lives is right now, right here on this show, and we're training people how to do it more efficiently. So, you know, I'm not going to knock anybody, you know, there's no obligation to come here and watch, but if you do, you'll pick up tips on how to annihilate globe believers very quickly, because the arguments just get more and more and more and more concise. The housekeeping questions haven't changed in, what, 3 years?
Actually, what it'll do is it'll teach you that you don't even have to engage with these blurthers. You don't have to talk to them. Now, I actually said to Rachel last night, don't go on Fight the Flat Earth, because you know more than he knows. He's going to lie, he's going to call you names, and he's going to try and make you look bad at all opportunities, no matter what. If you make a minor mistake on something, he's going to jump all over it, right? I said, don't do it. You don't need to go on there to be able to show that you know more than he does about the topic that he loves the most, because he does. You just don't need to do it. Now, she went on anyway, and I was like, Rachie, there's no need to go on there. You haven't benefited from going on there. But we don't need to be able to talk to these morons when you realise that the housekeeping questions are still valid, and none of them have been able to debunk any of them. It's a problem.
We don't, Tony, but they desperately need people, don't they? They need people that, and respectfully to Rachie, that they can try and trip up, that maybe haven't got most of the tools in the box ready to batter them. That's why they don't come here. But what they do need is newer people who haven't got the full argument settled to do it in a debate, and that's what they're after. As you just said, they're just waiting for that one little mistake, and they'll jump all over it to prove that the Earth's a ball because you've made one little mistake. Well, nah, sorry, Muppets. Yeah, I don't need you. I know they'd be desperate for any of us lot to go over there and make their best rating shows ever, and that's they're defined by us.
The thing is, she didn't even make a mistake, and they jumped all over her. Because she didn't use the phrase unbalanced force, which Newton, as I demonstrated, did not say. They thought that because she didn't say an unbalanced force, they thought that everything that she said could be dismissed, and that's how they treated it. But the reality is, even if he did say it and she made the mistake of not saying it or not understanding when corrected or accepting when corrected, it doesn't change the point, which was successfully obfuscated by them jumping up at unbalanced. Because the reality is, you can't calculate a force into existence mathematically. You need an interaction that makes something accelerate, not a calculation. Something, you need a verb. You need a doing, something that's doing, you need a verb to do that, not a calculation. So that point then got successfully obfuscated so that they couldn't, they weren't made to answer the question, well, what made Cavendish's Hillbilly Blue Balls Cavendish test? What made his balls accelerate?
And with that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you, first and foremost, to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, however, stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. If you are watching live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, and all that good stuff. Also, below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is a particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. I've been Nathan Oakley. Stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream, and I will see you all in the next video.
Happy day.